All right. I'm Wendy Solomon with Wendy Jade Photography, and I am going to talk to you today about how to look better in your selfies. So I put some information in the chat about how you can access this. If you want to follow along, you can click on the link and follow along right on your phone or your device. How many of you, we look at everybody's Instagram feeds and Facebook feeds, how many of you feel just a little bit intimidated by that? It can be crazy when you look at how amazing people's feeds look, and they've got all these spectacular images and looks like life is grand. And sometimes when you take a selfie, you can have those crazy looks on your face and that kind of thing. So we're going to talk today about how you can have those amazing Instagram feeds the same way and just look terrific all the time in your selfies. So uh, first thing, normally when you're in a presentation, people ask you to turn the phone off and put it away. We're going to ask you to get the phones out because we're going to play a little bit today and take some selfies and see how you do after looking at a little bit of information. A picture, there are four main things that I'm going to take a look at today in talking about what makes a good selfie. That is lighting, composition, posing and angles, and processing. And we're going to go just very briefly onto all of these things. First, we're going to talk about light, because light is so important in how your photo turns out. And we're specifically going to talk about diffusion and direction. So have you ever noticed you go outside, and this is one of the best examples is just the sun. When you're outside in the sun and you're taking a picture and you are facing that sun, have you ever noticed that you look all squinty, and sometimes it's so bright that it overexposes your face, or it'll overexpose whatever is in the background. So the diffusing that is super important in making sure you get a great photo, because otherwise, like I say, you've got a squinty face and overexposure going on. So when you are facing that sun, it can be too bright, but if you're facing away from the sun, or the sun is directly above you, you've got funny shadows on your face, because that is it's making your own brow bone, your nose, all of those things. It's putting shadows underneath your features, and it makes you look older. And I don't know about any of you, but I don't want to look any older. So the best thing when you're outdoors is if you can shoot on an overcast day, because what happens then, the sun is shining down, but that layer of clouds is actually providing a diffusion of the sun for you. So the sun's rays are penetrating through, but it's it's making that light a lot softer. So everything looks nice and soft and even. But what happens when Mother Nature did not provide that nice overcast sky for you? The next best thing is what we call open shade. So, and what I mean by that is if you're standing in the shade and you can look directly up and see the sky, that's open shade. So if you are standing in the shade, but you're, say, under a bridge or under a canopy of trees, and you look up, you're seeing those branches, or you're seeing that bridge, that's not open shade, because then when you're under that structure, the structure itself is going to be putting those shadows on your face. So like this woman, we positioned her in a place where she's between some buildings. So the building itself is creating the shade. So she is standing where there's nothing above her. So there's no shadow on her face, but you can see that patch of sunlight behind her. So it makes such a difference. And this woman, by positioning her just a different direction or a few feet apart, not in a completely different place, but just look at the difference. In the first one, she's facing the camera, but she's facing the sun. And so her face is kind of overexposed, and there's a patch of sunlight in the back. So it's very uneven and kind of distracting. And in the second one, she's positioned where her face is in the shade, but the sun is behind her. And so her face has some shadows on it. Whereas in the third one, she's in that nice even sunlight. And so everything looks even in that photo. The other thing to look at is if you're in the shade, and even if you're in open shade, but if it's spotty, you know how sometimes the sunlight is coming through the leaves and making that dappled sunlight. That's really bad for photos because it's really hard, if not impossible, to fix some photos where the sunlight is just, you know, making little spots of light on your face. So watch out for that as well. So if it's just a harsh sunny day and you've got that perfect backdrop that you want to take and you can't find a shady spot, the next best thing is maybe turn your head and look away from the camera, make it look like it was an artistic choice to, you know, to do the photo that way. Get creative. So then let's say we're not outside, let's go indoors. The principles are a little bit different there. Now we want to, you know, like outside, we were saying, don't look directly into the light. When you're indoors, you do want to look for those light sources because, again, automatically we are under a structure. We're under that roof. So that ceiling is making shadows on your face, especially if there's overhead light. The light is coming from the wrong direction. So you want to find that light source. So usually that's a window or a doorway. And so you want to be facing that and usually fairly close to that. And so you are facing that light source. And if you can't find, like say your house or wherever you are is very dark, there are not a lot of windows, or it's just a dark day, you can find or make alternative light sources from a lot of things. Positioning yourself in front of a mirror that helps reflect what light there is, taking a lamp, having some fairy lights or a fireplace or candles, or, you know, you can just get creative with that too. And so you might have to experiment a little bit about where to put the light and how far away and what angle, but that can make a big difference too. And then you want to also think about the time of day. Like I'm kind of switching back to outdoors again, but if you are shooting at high noon and, you know, the light is very bright and very harsh, that is probably the worst time to try to get a photo. So if you can, I mean, again, selfies by their nature, sometimes wherever you are and whenever you are, that's when you want to take the selfie. But if you can wait until later or earlier, you know, when the sun's rays are, when the sun is lower in the sky. So like the best time for photography is golden hour, which is the hour right after sunset or sunrise, or the hour before sunset. Those times of day, the sun, like I say, is lower in the sky. So you get those longer shadows, you have more shade, and the light tends to be more even. And another, like a pro tip here, a lot of cell phones now have manual mode. So you have more control over how much light the camera is putting into your photos, and therefore how good the photos can be. So if your phone doesn't have a manual mode, you might look at some of the apps that are out there for that help create that. So again, low sun versus high sun, just some more examples of that. If the sun is too high in the sky, it creates some of those harsh shadows, and shooting with dark shadows on your face, or just in general kind of dark. And you can counter that with different things, but it's just easier to position yourself in the right kind of light in the first place. So when you have open shade and bright sunshine, by positioning this little kid a little bit further over into the full shade, it's a lot better. And or turning her around, because if she was shot from the other direction, it would have been so much better, because the sun would have been behind her and not so intense on her face. And again, squinty and shadows. Indoors, like I say, if you have that overhead light, if you think about that, how the direction, because now we've talked about diffusion, we're going to talk about direction. The overhead lights that are straight overhead, or when the sun is overhead, it's casting those shadows on your face. So again, you can see in the photo how much difference that makes to the shadows on her face. So in general, facing the windows, facing whatever light source you have is usually the best. And you can diffuse that. Sometimes diffusing light, like if you've got some adequate light, but it's too bright, you can often use a sheet or a piece of tissue paper over that light to diffuse it slightly too and make it softer. So we've talked about a lot of things to do with light. So now everybody get out your phones for a second and get your cameras on, because we are all going to take a group selfie using the information we just talked about. So in whatever room you're in, if you would figure out where your best light is and turn that direction and take yourself a selfie. And while you're doing that, I'm going to take a selfie of all of us taking a selfie. So find your best light and see if you can get creative with, let's see if I can even figure out how to do this myself. Not very coordinated here today. So there we go. There we go. I was facing the wrong way for the light, but I got a selfie of all of us taking a selfie. And so, yeah, did everybody get a selfie?
Yeah, but not. And as I face the light.
Yeah. And so, yeah, just a quick snap, and then keep doing your selfie if you haven't finished yet. But I'm going to move on to composition. So composition, especially with a selfie. Now, of course, we're talking selfies specifically, but a lot of people think composition is posing, and that might be part of it. But think about where you're placed in the photo and what's in the background, because composition encompasses a lot of all of those things. So most people position themselves right in the center all the time, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it can just be more interesting if you place yourself slightly off center, and then that puts the emphasis on, you know, the other things in the background as well. So you can experiment with that a little bit. And when you're thinking about composition, if you're taking your photos like we typically do, your selfies at the end of your arm, that's, you know, that doesn't give you a lot of play with composition. But with composition especially, sometimes you might want to prop your phone up on something, or even use a tripod and use your timer, and you can take a selfie that way. Yeah, Tammy's got hers right there. There's lots of tripods you can use that are kind of fun if you're really into selfies, or you really want that good one. With composition, there's also something called leading lines, and you can use those to your benefit. So using a fence, or like in this case, siding or different building structures, to make those lines look, you know, it's directing the eye to your subject or to you. So like in the lower left there, you see that with Wendy, we put her in like there's a bunch of lines, a bunch of vertical lines, but it's also kind of creating a horizontal line there, or a kind of a diagonal line. And both the lines and the black and white, and then her pink dress, both of those things are kind of focusing the attention on her, but making it more interesting than just if she was against a plain background. And the same thing on like the lower right with Jeff. I put him sort of at the intersection of a bunch of lines. There's a lot of things going on there, but I did that, you know, purposely. So you can use your backgrounds and what's in the background to create those lines that can be really interesting. And then layering. I love using layering to make a photo more interesting. And what that means is just like if you have something in the foreground, something in the background, your subject maybe in between, or I'm saying subject, but in the case of a selfie, that would be you. The one on the top right, this lady is in a wheelchair. And so I wanted to make sure, I was trying to de-emphasize the fact that she was in a wheelchair for their engagement photos. And so I put her, you know, kind of nestled in some tree limbs. And that was one of her favorite photos of that. But I love using that because it gives some depth in the photo. And speaking of depth of your photo, look at the first the two photos on the left. In the first one, she's in that sea of sunflowers. But of course, for one thing, she's facing the wrong way for the sun. But you see a patch of flowers and you think, oh, that's so pretty. And it is. but it's just one big long patch of flowers. That's great. And in the lower one, she's against a wall of foliage, which is again, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you have a background that has a little bit more depth in it, like the one on the right, you can see that some of the trees are fairly close behind them and some are further away. And so it creates a lot more interest in the background. So thinking about, and again, if you're at arm's length, this probably isn't so pertinent, but if you're propping your phone up and using that to get a background, the depth of the depth of the background can make a big difference in the interest of the photo. And then using some natural frames, so archways, doorways, curtains, a couple of trees. These can be, again, really interesting ways of focusing that attention on the subject. Like I love the one of Lizbeth in that arched doorway on the bottom, how it's kind of a dramatic pose. And with her in that red dress, it just sort of focuses the attention. All of these have that same thing. But if you find an archway or a doorway or something like that, it can be really good to position yourself in that for interest. And another thing, noticing the background when you're composing your photo, because sometimes an otherwise great photo is sort of ruined by everything going on in the background behind it. And I shouldn't say it's ruined. If you like the photo, that's all that matters. But if you can have the difference between a really clean background and a really messy background, it makes the difference in, how great that photo can be. And so, and I put overexposed in here. This particular photo is completely overexposed, but sometimes you have those situations like we were talking about. If you're in the shade, but there's a little patch behind you that's sunny, and so that little piece gets overexposed, it ends up drawing your eye to the overexposed part instead of to you. So I included that in here as part of a distracting element when you're thinking about your composition. So how do you fix that with your composition? Well, the easiest example is if you've got some messy stuff in the background, just clean it up, move this stuff over so that you can shoot what you want without all the distracting things. Or you can just change the angle that you're shooting at. I've done it before where there's something in the background I don't want visible, and you just hold the phone up a little higher, and now you're shooting down and you're catching the floor or the ground instead of whatever's in the background. Or propping your phone up and shooting upward, like in the one on the right, shooting up toward the sky. You don't notice that there were 30 people walking behind her. So thinking about those angles or changing the angle can make a difference in your composition. So now it's a time for another selfie. So using some things that we just talked about, take another quick selfie and see if you can use some composition, something more creative in your composition than you would normally do, using that different angle or just a great background, or moving a prop so that you can, or moving an object so that you can take a really nice clean background, whatever it might be. Just think about that for a minute and take a quick snap. I'm going to take a selfie too while we're talking. Let's see. Did everybody get a selfie yet? Oh, Denise is getting real creative there. And I'm
just had to get up and move.
This is awesome. This is awesome. And I'm hoping that all of you will post some of these selfies and then tag all of us too, see what you came up with, if you like the selfies that you came up with. So great. Hopefully everybody got their selfie. So now we're going to talk about one of my most favorite things, posing and angles. Okay, when I'm taking photos, one of the things that people say, especially women, will tell me the most often is, oh my gosh, my chin and my neck, I have this double chin. I'm going to give you 2 tricks to fix that. And the first one is, for some reason, when we take photos, selfies or posed photos, with a photographer, we tend to tuck our neck up, and then any loose skin here, well, I shouldn't say loose skin, just even regular skin bunches up when we tuck our neck like that. And it does look we look heavier, we look older, it just looks funny. And so you want to also think about your head and your face. Sometimes we tend to tilt our head up or down when we're about to take a photo, but really focus on keeping your face flat toward the camera and not tilted up or down. That is usually more flattering. And it also, especially in terms of, say, a headshot, it looks more professional, because if you're looking up, you can tend to look kind of arrogant. If you're tilted down, you kind of look shy. And those are just oversimplifications, but try to keep your head flat most of the time. With that being said, think about your chin. And now what you want to do is push your chin out, not tilting it up, but take your whole face and push it forward, like if you're trying to be a turtle. So just push that forward. Okay, it feels ridiculous. And if you're facing sideways, it looks ridiculous. But if you look at it, look at all of us right now. You push your chin forward, and what happens is it pulls all of this up, and it makes your chin more separate from your neck, and it is very flattering when you're doing it head on. So that's one trick. I always call that the turtle move. Then the second one is, if you are, this gives you the same effect, but if you want to lean slightly forward from the waist. So whether you're sitting or standing, if you lean slightly toward the waist, but again, you work focus on keeping that face flat toward the camera. So you're basically keeping your face in the same position, but moving from the waist. So look what happens. So when I'm this direction versus if I go like this, it makes that, the neck, it lengthens the neck and makes all of this go away. So those are two tricks to accomplish the same thing. And you can use them both at the same time, bend slightly from the waist and push your chin out like a turtle. So again, you don't want to go like this, but you want to just bend from the waist and then keep that face lifted. So instant facelift I just gave you. So now let's move on. The other thing people talk about is body in general. So it's not a natural thing to have a camera pointed at your face. So the first thing that happens is, oh no, where do I put my hands? What's my face doing? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So we tend to just be straight on toward the camera with our hands down and our legs straight. And that is really the most unflattering pose. So you want to think about twisting your body. So like twisting your shoulders, even just slightly, makes a difference in how slim you look and how interesting it looks. And then putting your hands and elbows, bending your knees and bending your elbows. Basically, I always say, if it bends, bend it. And that is going to be your most flattering photo. Now, in this example here, obviously she's crouched down, she's in a completely different pose, but look at the difference in how flattering that looks for her body and how confident she looks. So you want to, like I say, just get some movement going on and not standing straight on toward the camera if at all possible. Another thing is the angle. Most cell phones, most if not all, are wide angle lenses. And then we're at arm's length, so we're taking it very close to the body. In both cases, whatever's the closest to that lens is what's going to look bigger. And so in general, we tend to hold our phones down a little bit while we're taking that, so we're looking in. And so like in the first one, the photo is taken from about waist high, and that's emphasizing her stomach. The second one, we've taken a little bit higher, and then the third one higher yet. And so you see how much slimmer she looks and where the emphasis is placed. So usually, a lot of the time, as a general rule, having the phone just slightly above you is better, because that's going to put the emphasis on your face. And then hands. Think about, again, a lot of the time selfies, we just take a picture of just the face, and that's fine. But putting your hands into it in some way or other, there's multiple ways to use your hands, and that look very natural and yet that makes the photo so much more interesting. And it's just something that we sometimes don't think to do, but using something with your hands can make a big impact. And then props. I love using props, sunglasses, accessories, your favorite coffee mug, your favorite toy that you play with on your desk every day, whatever, your pet can be your prop. And so I see Stacy's cat cooperating there with being a prop right now. So using something else in your photo can be just fun. And depending on your business too, you can use a prop that reinforces your business. And I mean, you don't necessarily want a prop in every photo, but those can be fun to use too, and can really show off your personality. And one last thing about posing and angles, be aware of where your lens is on the camera, because look at my horrible selfie there. How many photos do you see like this where the person's looking completely off? It looks like they're looking off camera because they're actually looking at themselves in the viewfinder instead of looking at the camera itself. And again, with a wide angle lens, that little bit of a difference in where you're looking might be only an inch away, but it makes a big difference in where your eyes look like they're looking with the picture. So get it lined up and then look at the camera before you click that button is my pro tip. Don't be like me on selfies. Smiling, that's not really posing, but I included this because it's so trendy right now to do the real serious face. And again, selfies are for having fun, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're doing a professional photo, I definitely recommend smiling in your photos no matter what. There's a site called Photo Feeler that I just love. It's where you log on and you submit your photos, and people rate your photos based on how trustworthy you look and how authentic and how professional and various things. And you can it's a great way to compare a couple photos, like should I use this one or this one for my headshot or for this event that I'm doing or whatever. And you can compare, do I look approachable, do I look friendly, those kinds of things, and see what people think. But also there was a survey on there where they tested how professional people looked, and they found that the amount of smiling it made a big difference in how people responded to those photos. So again, for personal and fun photos, it doesn't really matter. It just matters what you like. But in a professional context, I would definitely recommend smiling in your photos, because they showed that non-smiling versus a small smile, the smiling photos, people reacted to those much more favorably. And then the big smile, the laughing smile, the bigger and heartier the smile, the more people positively responded to them. And then there's so many trends. You remember the duck face and things. Don't do that. Again, if you're doing it for fun, do whatever you want. But there's so many trends that kind of come and go that it's just kind of funny what people do in photos. Okay, so your turn with some poses. So now take another selfie. This is the last actual selfie we'll take, and then the next one we're going to have a little homework with it. But for this one, do a fun pose, or pose with a prop, or put your hands in the pose, whatever, any of the things that we talked about. Take a selfie. And again, bonus points if you post any of these, and especially if you tag any of us in these afterward. I got to take my selfie too. What am I going to pose with? Let's see. I don't know. I can pose with my computer. Let's see. There, whoops. There again, I'm barely in the photo, but there you go. Yeah.
Let's do it this way.
Yeah, those are good. You guys are getting some really professional ones here, some really creative ones.
Let's do that.
Yeah. And then the next step, over the next week, maybe everybody play with all of these things, the posing, the composition, the lighting, and put it all together and see if you have any better photos after this. But the next thing I was going to talk about is filters. And in post processing, like in processing photos, that's normally like in the photography world, that happens after the photos are taken, where we edit and process everything. But with cell phones and selfies, we're usually talking about filters that we use. And I'm not a big fan of filters, and I'm just saying that from a photography eye, but because what I don't like about them is, for one thing, photos are not all starting out at the same point. So like maybe that photo already has a lot of pink and whatever, and you put that pink filter on it, and so then starts looking unnatural. And versus like these two photos have the same filter on it, but they look completely different. And that might be what you're going for. And again, if these are for personal, do whatever, have at it with the filters. But I just find that they don't all do what we think that they do. We think that they give it a certain uniformity, and I feel like they don't. And for professional photos, you want some consistency in your image. Again, for fun, filters are just like great to use. But the other thing I don't like about filters, and especially editing type filters and editing programs for your cell phone, is they're great, but a lot of people really overdo it. And I see so many faces now out there that look like they're plastic. They look like Barbie dolls or something, because they've been so over edited, or they're orange, or they're overexposed, or whatever, because it's not you can really overdo it. And again, if you're doing it for fun, do whatever you want. But for professional, I would say avoid any of those. Avoid filters in general, or just try not to overdo it. So now this is where I'll have a little bit of homework for you. So we're not going to play with filters right now, but take a couple selfies, and you can do it right now because they don't have to be anything spectacular, but take 2 selfies in a row. So click, click, so that you'll have 2 photos that are very, very similar. So let's just do that real quick. All right, 1, 2. Did everybody get one of those? So you'll have 2 in a row that are very, very much the same. And now what you're going to do with those after this is use whatever filters you would normally use on one of them, or play with filters. If you've never played with filters, play with them and just play around with it and try some filters out, and then share it with a few people and see which one they like, the one with or without the filters. And that's a fun way to just try out some filters and see what you like, and what kind of style you might want to start using for your photos. So now we've talked so much about selfies, and some of the things to make your photos better, and that could be with your selfies, but also with your professional headshots. So there's a time and a place for your selfies, which is every day, all the time. But I feel like every business person also needs a professional headshot. You never want to take a selfie for your business. And most businesses also need some business branding photos, which are showing what you do and how you do it and what makes you unique. And it's expressing your personal brand through your personality. So I have a special offer just for you, and you can scan this QR code to get that, or in a minute, I'll put that in the chat as well. The link. This is only going to be available for 1 week. So you can get this, you can purchase it now and then use it whenever you want. So how it works is you get to level up for free. So you can get any package, and it will automatically upgrade you to the next level up for no additional charge. So for instance, if you buy the executive headshot package for $140, you would automatically be upgraded to the professional branding session at no additional cost. And so all of that, like I say, with the link or the QR code, you can go and you can see all of this and see everything that it includes. But I really do hope that you take advantage of this special offer this week, because I want nothing more than for all of you to be super, super successful. And I would love it if I were able to be a small part in that continuing success for you. So thank you very much.
Awesome.